Man, my hair is just the frizziest today. I did not plan to make this video. I'm actually recording this as I'm rendering out another video for you guys, so that'll be fun. But hopefully it doesn't screw up the recording at all. I just feel like I need to talk about this. I said I'd let you guys know in the comments, I think. Said I'd let you guys know the next time I knew anything about the Amphibia season finale and what's going on with that. Before I get swept up in talking about those. If you hear any noise in the background, my nephews are over. That's them running around playing Miraculous Ladybug, which I have started watching now. For the one of you who's been asking me, you know who you are. You'll see this. Anyway. Yeah, so Amphibia. I still don't know why the finale was pushed back. It doesn't seem like anybody does, except for some bigwigs at Disney, probably. Except that at this point, Disney is kind of, I can do whatever I want, rich, so I mean, they may not even have a reason for doing this. Who frickin' knows? What I do have for you is some information from the creator of the show, whose name I don't remember. I'm going to go check because I like him. He seems like a nice guy. Matt Braley. His name is Matt Braley. The episode has leaked. I'm not sure how exactly. I heard some rumors that it had leaked through streaming services that it was going to be hosted on. That may be where it came from, but personally I don't care where it came from. He asked us not to watch the episode and not to spoil people. And so that's primarily what this video is about. I downloaded half the episode before I saw him explicitly ask us not to watch it. So even though I wouldn't spoil it for anybody, and I don't think it would ruin my enjoyment of it watching it a second time if I watched it now, I have decided not to download the second half, and I've decided not to watch it, and I'm avoiding spoilers. I haven't searched the Amphibia tag on Tumblr. I've been staying off of chains about Amphibia on Twitter. I haven't searched it on YouTube. I'm avoiding it completely so that I don't get spoiled. He seems really upset about this. It definitely feels like, well, he is trying to spin this as a positive, this delay as a positive. It does really seem like, one, they can't really talk about it much yet, and also, two, the delay was sprung on the creative staff as much as it was on us. And so the primary purpose of this video is to ask you guys the same thing that he did, to avoid watching the episode if you find it, and to not share spoilers about it if you happen upon them. I'm not going to lie to you guys, I saw a couple of spoilers. They were just a couple of screenshots of a fight between Anne and another character, and I'm very hyped. I'm very hyped about the episode at this point. The temptation to watch it is definitely there. But the hope is that the wait won't be that long. The rumor going around is that they're waiting to air it until they have a trailer for the next season of Owl House ready so that they can air that trailer alongside the episode. If that's the case, I can't imagine it'll be too long a wait, because Owl House Season 2 isn't too far off at this point, right? Which reminds me, I'd really like to get through my reviews of Season 1 of that before Season 2 comes out so I can review Season 2 live. Need to make a note of that in my notes. To help tide you guys over, though, until the episode does come out and maybe help alleviate that temptation to go seek out the leak, I thought I'd give you guys a few mini theories in this video, some ideas that I've been kicking around, but that I haven't really formed out enough to make into their own videos, as well as one idea that I saw mentioned online, that while it's not personally in the direction that I would go with the show, it's definitely interesting enough to consider. Which, let's actually start out with that one. Somebody pointed out online, and I've mentioned this too, the build-up to this finale has really felt like more of a series finale build-up than a season finale build-up. And since we know it's not the series finale, that means that this is probably going to lead to a shake-up to the status quo. A bigger shake-up to the status quo, in fact, than even going to Newtopia was. The prevailing theory has also been that the girls aren't going to get to go back home, that they're either going to lose the opportunity to do so, or they're going to choose to stay when they see how dangerous the king actually is. And I've theorized that Marcy is going to end up siding with the king, and Anne's going to end up with Sasha for a while, out with her resistance group, and that's going to be the status quo shakeup that occurs. But somebody online suggested, and this is a really interesting idea, that it would be much more interesting if, after seeing how dangerous the king actually is, the girls do get to go home. And the status quo shakeup is them on Earth, maybe even with some of the other Amphibia characters, forced to try to get back. I'm not sure what form that would take yet, as the main draw of the show, aside from the character interactions, which would be retained in a situation like that, of course, is the location. It's just so interesting and immersive. While I wouldn't mind getting to see more of the version of Earth that these characters came from, I feel like separating the show from the setting of Amphibia for too long would hurt my enjoyment of it. But then again, so far, this cast and crew have knocked every concept that they've tried for right out of the park, so it may turn out absolutely fantastic if that happens. So now I'm really interested in seeing if that ends up being the case. And at the very least, a situation like that would at least theoretically give us the opportunity to see all three girls together for a while longer, whereas my scenario separates Anne and Sasha from Marcy, which is definitely a thing I don't want to happen. The second is one that I thought of just a couple days ago. Way too late for me to flesh it out into a full theory in time for the season finale, at least when we thought the season finale was still coming on time. So I pretty much abandoned it, because I knew the season finale would confirm it one way or another anyway. But since the season finale is not happening yet, here's the bare bones of this idea. I was thinking about character motivations and how Sasha's motivations of helping the Resistance and also returning home feel contradictory, since you would have to do one before the other, very definitively. And that got me thinking about how interesting it is that since one of those things has to be done before the other, meaning that technically Sasha's main motivation right now is to stay in Amphibia and do this other thing, how interesting it is that her main motivation right now, at least, is different from the other two. And that's when I got thinking about something. Wouldn't it be so much more interesting if that's not the case? If, in fact, all three of them have different motivations? And I got thinking about, what could Andreas have used to get his hooks into Marcy? I can't think of much, unless he just managed to trick her into thinking that the others were going to betray her at some point, and got her wary of them. But she doesn't really seem like the kind of person who would fall for that. So it got me thinking. She's been treating her time in this world very much like she's playing a fantasy RPG. She likes that kind of thing. What if she doesn't want to go home, but also doesn't want to overthrow the crown like Sasha does? She just wants to stay here as things are and go on adventures, preferably with her friends. It's certainly, at least at this point, the best motivation I can think of for why she would side with Andreas. It would create a real-life version of the situation in the First Temple where she had to give up the game in favor of her friends. And it would explain some of her expressions in recent episodes when people were talking about the box. Like, it's probably not going to end up being true. We're probably going to have a detail revealed in the finale that debunks this. But it's interesting to think about, and it technically does give the girls three different motivations while shifting Anne and Sasha's motivations to be closer to each other, giving us a plausible reason why she would side against both of them in the upcoming season, as I and others have theorized. The final mini-theory is the one that's most complete. I'm going to just summarize it here because I might still go more in depth with this one in its own video at some point. But it's one that I've been noodling on for a really long time at this point. I've talked about it a little bit in some reviews, but I was kind of waiting for the season finale to see if we got any more evidence of it before I talked about it, because I didn't really feel like the season finale would either confirm or debunk this one. Right? I figured it would be a nice bit of bridge the gap theory crafting. But basically, as I've mentioned before, I definitely feel like the magic of this world comes from the ground. And I don't think, like I've seen a couple of people theorize, that the giant monster in Andreas's basement is the source of it. But I do think that that creature is connected to it in some way. And by magic, I do mean all magic. Even the witchy magic that Maddie does, I feel, comes from the ground. Because if you look at it, a lot of the ingredients that she uses for her witchy magic comes from natural sources. Stuff that grows from the ground. Or stuff that eats stuff that grows from the ground. Or eats stuff that eats stuff that's grown from the ground. Like, we see stuff with weird names, and we see them pull stuff from weird sources sometimes. But end of the day, there's no, like, obviously magical ingredients. They are all just weird Amphibia versions of regular witchy kinds of stuff. Like, there's a couple of exceptions in there, I guess you could argue, but for the most part, I think that remains true. Like, there's a lot of plants and stuff that she makes use of, is my point. We also see in the episode Maddie and Marcy that she's still only level 1 in her witchery, and yet one of the spells that she knows well enough to recognize it immediately and know how to counter it immediately is a growth spell, telling me that that growth spell is low-level magic, probably level 1 magic, so something really basic and easy to do and control if you know how to control it. And my theory is basically that that's because growth magic is kind of an automatic thing almost, that exposure to amphibian magic can just make creatures larger over time. Like, straight up from the very beginning of the show, size has been associated with monstrosity, with being a beast, a dangerous creature. It's one of the reasons the other characters were so slow to trust Anne, aside from the fact that she's radically different in appearance from them. She's also larger, so they think of her as a monster. Couple that with the fact that all of the creatures in Amphibia are larger than their real-world counterparts, and yet the ones that come from civilization and therefore have less direct exposure to the nature of Amphibia are still smaller relative to the others which have more direct exposure, like the giant insects and stuff. And then magical creatures, creatures with actual demonstrable magical abilities, tend to be even much larger than that. Even Andreas at this point in his life seemed larger than he ever could have been before, even when he was already an adult, because if you go back to that torn up portrait, I do definitely think that the toad featured here is supposed to be Beryl, and the thing he's leaning on is supposed to be Beryl's warhammer. And if that's the case, then he's definitely larger than the average modern toad. The way he's leaning on the warhammer suggests that pretty definitively. But Andreas, relative to him, still doesn't seem as large as he's been shown to be in scenes where his size is the emphasis, i.e., the scene exists to establish his great size for the audience. And I can only really think of one reason why he would grow that much larger so late in his life, and that's his proximity to that creature under the castle. If this really is a powerful creature, it's possible that it's leaking magic and exposing Andreas to greater quantities of a kind of magic that he hadn't encountered before. So if we look at it like there's a clear hierarchy of more beastly and more powerful magical creatures being larger, this incredibly large creature would therefore have more magic than virtually anything else. So it makes sense that a bit of its power leaking out could change Andreas and make him grow even larger than he already was. So maybe it's less accurate to say that I think the magic of Amphibia comes from the ground, and more accurate to say that I feel like it comes from nature, which just happens to be connected, at least most of the time, to the ground. Like between the brain mushrooms of the first temple and the mountain of the second temple and the volcano of the third, all of those things come up out of the ground and create a natural ecosystem around them. The mushroom forest, the mountain, and the volcano are all distinctly different, and yet they have a similar impact on their environment simply by existing. So I guess, in short, to break this one down, I'm really starting to think that the natural ecosystems of Amphibia, the way that their natural components interact with each other, generates this magical energy. That the witches of Amphibia are able to tap into that more readily than some others by harvesting components from those environments and then causing them to interact with each other in different ways than they would naturally. That growth in Amphibia is, at least in part, tied to how directly you are immersed in the natural world, that the gems and the temples help people to connect with that directly rather than having to know any of this extra stuff, and that the beast under the castle is so large and so beastly simply because it has so much magic within it. It may even be some kind of creature which absorbs magic, something that would have destroyed Amphibia for its magic had it not been sealed away. Like, I'm sure you can tell this theory feels a little incomplete. I'm not actually sure what the point of it is. I haven't really written a thesis for it, but there's all the details. Make of them what you will. And again, before I do the sign-off, I want to remind you guys, don't watch the episode that leaked. Just don't do it. That's the nice thing to do. And if you have seen it, like, no shade. Just don't spoil it for anybody else. Please. As per usual, though, guys, I'd like to know what do you think of any of the ideas presented in this video. What do you think about the leaked episode controversy? Have you heard anything about it that I didn't mention in this video? And what do you think of the theory ideas that I put forth? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, and while you're down there, you might as well like the video and share it with anyone else you think would enjoy my content. Subscribe if you haven't. I'm trying to get myself out there, and I'd really appreciate it if you guys could help. You can check out links to my social medias and to my Patreon in the description of the video, but either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.